Hi, concluding Cubs and Culture for January 15th, 2018, talking about pay-to-play solutions. Okay, so one of the ones that I think probably will not happen, but it would increase the pace of play, is to limit or structure replay differently. So in baseball, in the regular season, there's 2,490 games, if I'm doing my math right. In any case, well over 2,400 games. And the thing is, because you're ultimately dealing with human beings, no matter what sort of way you structure a replay, there's still going to be calls which are either, because it's ultimately a judgment call where reasonable people can disagree with the interpretations of the rules or whatever. And I'll have an example in a second. Or just by human error, they're going to, even with replay, they're going to blow the calls. So the thing about replay is you're not having replay in the regular season is not eliminating errors. It's reducing errors in terms of judgment calls on fairly enforcing the rules, however you want to say it. But here's the thing. I do not believe, because there's absolutely no evidence that teams are systematically screwed over by the umpires, because of course if there was evidence that an umpire was being biased, he would be fired. And that's sort of a separate issue, is if you're looking at this in terms of protecting the integrity of the sport, it's very, very, look, I can think of a game here and there who turned on a bad call. If I really think about it, I can probably also think of a series between two, like a 3-game set or a 4-game set between two teams that turned on one particular call. I can't think of like a season series, which is 19 games, and for divisional opponents that turned on a single call from one call that the umpires missed. So because in general because there's so many games, there's 162 per team, that even if that human error, which we still have in the replay system, it's not biased in any way. So even if a bad call costs you a game in April, you're very likely to get that game back in August or whatever, because of the way in which human error is basically random. Okay. And so because of that, you can argue that the sample size of the sport, 162 games, should be large enough that you can accept human error within the sample and it still comes out fair. So my idea for limiting replay, and this is very much how the World Baseball Classic does it, is that in the regular season up until September, no replay at all. Not for boundary calls, not for anything else that can be reviewed. Then starting in September, because in September games start really like one game here, one game there can really truly matter. You allow for boundary calls on such as home runs or fair foul, that sort of thing, and then in the postseason, you allow for basically everything to be reviewed, because again, so like getting every single call right in Game 7 of the World Series is paramount, because there's no more games. And so basically, if you limit replay to somehow where you just slowly introduce it over the course of the season, because like games in April, you're basically just generating data to see how generally good players are. So losing a game here or there, or gaining a game here and there in April or May or whatever, isn't critical, because you still have let's say at the end, you still have over 100 games to play. So you trust the sample size of the regular season to weed out error on the umpire's part. And you know what? We did that for over 100 years, and it was fine. And there's no reason, like, it is just one game here or there. And I honestly cannot think of a series where I can say, well, this team would have been in the playoffs if it wasn't for that one call back in April where the umpire missed that pitch. Well, even pitches aren't reviewable, but missed that, I don't know, someone violating the Utley rule. Now, the other sort of thing about this human error thing is, and I'm going to use the Wilson Contreras play during the Dodger NLCS this year, where Chris Taylor scored a run by not touching the plate because okay, so there's a couple of years ago, Buster Posey, who was the catcher of the Giants, got really injured because someone collided with him. So this rule was instituted called the Posey rule, where basically it was you weren't allowed to hit the catcher unless he didn't give you a lane. And then if you didn't hit the catcher and he didn't give you a lane, you score. You basically, it was an illegal blocking of the plate. Therefore the run scored. Now, allegedly that happened with Wilson Contreras and Chris Taylor. I hate the Posey rule. I think the way in which it's written and the way in which provides a lane is not clear. Like what? Like how do you have to give them 3 feet? Do you have to give them the entire, like, it's not clear and how the rule is actually written exactly how much space the catcher needs to yield to the runner without risking him getting run over. I much rather have it just go, like, look, the Posey injury was really unfortunate, but it was, it's not like catchers are routinely having season-ending injuries because of collision. Again, this is a bit like replay. Injuries are going to happen. The question is, what is the likelihood of the season-ending or severe injuries happening all the time because of the rules? And I don't see any evidence that allowing the rules prior to the Posey rule, that it was a necessary invention. And I don't think it would have become a thing if Posey wasn't Posey and or he played for if he played for like the Rays or the Brewers or the Diamondbacks, no one would fucking care. It's specifically because he was a Giant. So going back to this Wilson Contreras play, I've watched this play several dozen times, and it seems to me that Contreras, that the ball brings Contreras into the path of Chris Taylor, and more important, but even with that, because it's a beautiful play, because he's moving and he's not blocking the plate entirely. He's giving the person like 6 inches, which is very little, but it's still a lane that he's like, maybe it violates the spirit of the rule because Contreras is trying to force Taylor to take a longer path to the plate or have him collide into him. But that sort of thing, it's been happening for over a century, and it was a beautiful play, and that run scored. It wasn't a difference maker because Contreras violated the Posey rule, allegedly. But the point of the matter is, I think it's ambiguous enough that even with replay, that it would be fair to go either way. It's ultimately a judgment call. So replay can't remove stuff like that. So for the regular season, you're going to have disagreement anyway. So why fuck over the game with long replay reviews? Trust the sample size. Okay, I'm ranting at this point. Now the other solution, which I think there's a 0% happening, is, of course, we know that National League games are shorter because of the designated hitter not being a rule. So I actually don't want the designated hitter situation between the two leagues to change, because it's ultimately it's very satisfying to me that the American League and National League style play have two different flavors. But here's the thing: if what we are interested in doing is increasing pace of play, both in terms of shortening the games and changing the number of outcomes, doing away with the designated hitter rule is actually one of the easiest ways of making the American League not use designated hitters, just doing away with them and only using them maybe in spring training or maybe certain minor league teams want to use them just to get more looks at the position player, because having the pitcher who's not very good at hitting changes the number of outcomes, because you have sack bunch, you have sacrifices, you end up having him basically an automatic out. Then you get sort of the strategy of, do I need to keep my pitcher in, or do I have to risk having him be the offense? And the thing is, pitchers at one point were like 80% as effective as position players in hitting when they were expected to hit more often. So it's not like pitchers are categorically like Johnny Cueto, who you may as well just not have him hit. He's just an automatic out. So by doing away with the designated hitter, you speed up the game, because pitchers will be easier outs even when they get better at hitting. But also it changes, like maybe he'll do a sac fly, maybe he'll do a suicide squeeze. Like the pitcher's not up there to hit a home run. He's there to take 5 pitches and possibly get a single. So it just changes the flavor of that at bat. Again, I don't think this is going to happen, but it would be an easy way of speeding up the game and making it less stagnant. Okay, that's pretty much it. Oh, the other thing is you could make it so that millennials can afford to go to the game, so they fall in love with the game because it's better in the park. But that's a separate topic, so let me just leave it there. Cubs and culture out. This was very ranty, but I hope someone enjoys it.